Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. Welcome to part 2 of our discussion on sites with guests Ted Trafford and Brad Hightower. Last episode, we talked about the importance of investigators and site motivation while sustaining study momentum. For this episode, we will address the impact of protocol errors and inconsistencies on sites and recruitment. So maybe, Ted, do you want to get us started on this?
Sure. So this is actually something that is probably one of the biggest complaints I get from investigators, is that they get a protocol and they start a study. And as they're going through the study, they're discovering either errors in the protocol or they're seeing inconsistencies one section to the next, or in a lot of cases, it doesn't match the other documentation that you're given in a clinical trial. So there's something that's said in the protocol that doesn't match the lab manual, that doesn't match the ECRF. And it just leads to so many potential problems, including, potential violation of the inclusion-exclusion criteria. I'll start off. I'll give you one quick example that we see that's often in protocols. So there will be prohibited meds listed in the exclusion criteria, and later in the protocol there will be a section about prohibited meds, and the wording in the two different places will be just ever so slightly different, but because it's not exactly the same, it leads to a difference in interpretation. And the sponsor may have intended one thing, but they wrote another. And the investigator's trying to determine, well, which do I follow? Well, it's not that simple. Or the investigator may not have even noticed the difference between the two. And then it's only later on where the medical monitor calls them up and says, hey, you enrolled this patient who didn't meet this particular section of the protocol. You should have never enrolled them. Well, they met the exclusion criteria, so I enrolled them. So I don't know, Brad, do you see the same thing?
Yeah. And I think even, again, to go like maybe up a level, there's just an extreme lack of clarity.
Yeah.
In any clinical trial, really. And some of that, I think, when you look at how documents are managed or how sites are trained, I don't know about you, Ted, but it feels like you just sort of get a series of zip files shipped over to you. There's protocols, investigator brochures, SIV slides, lab manuals, pharmacy manuals, a lot of information in disparate locations.
Right.
Nothing connects all of this stuff together in any meaningful way. So you're sort of left as a CRC or a site manager, however your site may operate. You're sort of like a detective, right? You're like putting all these little pieces together about what needs to happen when and how. That's not even, to your point, even including, getting them past eligibility.
Right.
And then beyond that, there's oftentimes different ways to interpret some of these things. It's not always super objective. And I think that's a very broad and wide-ranging issue. And some sponsors do different things. Like you'll have to get approval before you can, randomize a subject. Maybe you've got to fill in additional paperwork and send it to the sponsor so they can say it's okay, which is a pain in the ass. But at the very least, it helps keep things clear. You're not going to get dinged later, for something that you did or didn't do. But maybe the better solution would be to just. I've worked protocols that have work instructions. It makes me think someone actually sat down and looked at all these things and said, like, how would this work? Instead of leaving it up to 100, 200 sites to all figure out independently from one another. Now, some sites may not like that. They may not want to follow the rule someone else wrote. But I think at the very least, it creates a great starting point to where you're a lot less likely to make mistakes, and also I think it creates a way by which those errors and inconsistencies can be sort of fleshed out early, instead of when you're 5 patients deep and your monitor finally shows up and you made the same mistake 5 times.
Yeah.
because you just had no other way of knowing.
Yeah. Have you ever seen or used any kind of system or a portal where, the sponsors contracted a vendor to kind of put all this together and give you, you know, one place that kind of acts as your home to reference all the documents and cross-check things, and it takes you to where you need to go. If you've got a question, it takes you to where you need to go in that protocol. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I've seen a couple offerings out there. They don't
Yeah.
appear to be very well adopted or very highly adopted right now. I
Yeah.
hope that they do, because
Yeah.
I do think that would be, again, extremely useful for
Right.
research coordinators. Because again, like you got to reference this, which references this, but maybe it was in an SIV slide, which isn't even,
Right. Yeah.
sometimes hard to even track down in the first place. So yeah, I know there are at least 2 or 3 vendors out there that are doing it. They appear to be doing it well, but unfortunately, I don't know, we haven't seen the uptake. Maybe sponsors don't yet see the value. I hope they do, because again, I think
Yeah.
you don't want your coordinators guessing. You want them enrolling patients.
Well, and you don't want them spending time searching for stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And because, like truly from a site perspective, we only get paid when the staff are seeing participants in a study.
Yep.
All the extra stuff we don't get paid for. And it's just extra work that the site compensates for. And the more time that your coordinator is spending not seeing a patient is just costing the site more money. And so if we could decrease the amount of time they have to spend searching for an answer, because heaven forbid they should have to call their CRA to get clarification. That just takes even longer. So
yeah, I think to your point, like sites don't run on billable hours. So if it takes me hours of research to figure out how to enroll a patient, that's a problem. And again, to go back to our earlier point, I'm going to go pick the easier protocol to work on,
right,
for better or worse.
right.
I also think it does this other pervasive thing that I've noticed throughout my career, is that oftentimes coordinators, when uncertain, are more likely to exclude a patient rather than take a risk that they may accidentally enroll a patient who didn't qualify. So if there's if there's a lack of clarity, I've seen this be like endemic in some academic institutions that I've been, where it almost feels like the coordinator's job is to exclude as many patients as possible. Because think about it, like most coordinators, if they enroll 1,000 patients, they don't make any additional money generally, especially in an academic institution. Maybe private sites are set up with bonus incentives. That's beside the point. But what you can definitely, if you enroll those patients, you're definitely opening up yourself to being yelled at by a CRA or getting in trouble or having to fill out more paperwork. And then they're going to tell your PI. Then your PI is going to be mad at you.
Yeah.
And so it puts a coordinator who, as we talked about earlier, they're oftentimes considered sort of the, lowest guy on the totem pole when it comes to clinical trials already. And they're getting pressure from both of those sides. So again, I don't think people always appreciate the trickle down that happens when there's a lack of clarity in a protocol, to Ted's point.
Yeah. And I think even simple things like you look at, so protocols have not really evolved a lot since I started doing clinical trials. And they're still very heavily this written document. That's fine. We have standards we have to meet. We have regulations and guidelines that dictate what has to be in a protocol. But are there not better ways so that an individual can learn? Because an individual doesn't typically learn well just through reading something, or for that matter, having a slide presented to them and having somebody read every word on that slide. That's not how people learn things. So why can we not come up with better ways to present the information? So just as an example, one of the first things I flip to in a protocol is that flow chart, that diagram that shows me what therapies the participant is going to be on for how long and when they might flip to the other. And it's all in this nice little chart. I mean, that tells me more about the study design than the 2 pages that were written about it. And can we not incorporate more things like that into protocol design that just make it easier?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a world where, there are sandbox environments in technology platforms. Like, why can't you run a patient through an enrollment visit in a sort of not virtual, but I guess, in a training type environment? Things like this where, because, I mean, look, I don't know about you, but maybe even the first 5 patients that you do, you're sort of scrambling, you're sweating, you're stressed
terrified.
out. Yeah, you are. You're like, oh, crud. Where does all this stuff? Where is this? Which platform? Wait, which one do I have to get their subject number from first so I can put it over here?
Yeah.
Hold on. I need to set up a phone. Meanwhile, again, what's often underappreciated is the patient is sitting and waiting.
Right.
And if it takes you 2 hours to get through a visit that you could have done in 40 minutes if you had the tools, like that's not good. We're not doing the right thing for patients when that's the case. And no site wants to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love a world where that could be hacked in a way, by being like, okay, here, run through as many patients as you want, get your process down. And then when a patient shows up, they're not sitting in the exam room. I'm popping in every 10 minutes. Okay, it's just be another minute. I'm very sorry. I'm still figuring this out. And everyone has a good experience.
Yeah.
So that's a do. If you're listening, sponsors, that's a do.
I love that idea. That's a definite do. Because we see that like studies are really complex, and we do some early phase 1 stuff, and those visits are really complex. And you're absolutely right. If there's an environment where the site, keep in mind the site gets paid to do some mock patients in the study, mock participants, that could improve things significantly and avoid the situation that we commonly see where the patient's sitting there for hours while the coordinator's trying to figure out some piece of tech that isn't working properly. The other thing that I was thinking about on this topic is the footnotes under the table of procedures. And have you ever kept track of what's the number of footnotes, the longest number of footnotes you've seen?
I think I've gotten down to FF, at some point.
Very apropos.
Yes, exactly.
It's but there's got to be a better way than just having a never-ending stream, because that just simply leads to errors.
Especially those footnotes are referencing another portion of the protocol that you've got to then flip to. It does start to become very like a circular thing. You start kind of chasing your tail, and again, that's frustrating as a coordinator.
Or certain footnotes that aren't even applicable to your site because you're not doing something because your country's not doing it, or your site wasn't doing that. Like, it would be nice to have an electronic protocol that's really customized for what your site is doing. Walk you through what you need to do. And if we're adding that number of footnotes in a protocol table, are we actually clear on what we want to accomplish with the study?
This was part 2 of 3. Make sure to listen to the last part of our discussion where we address the holdbacks in site payments. As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.